All right. So the dialogue today is about self-expression, which is a very broad and interesting idea. And we could go a lot of different directions with it, defining what self is and all of that. But let's kind of start at a very basic. Sometimes I think it's helpful, like the definition of something can often come when you define the outcome. So if we were to talk about self-expression today, let's kind of start by talking about what does it mean to express yourself?
I mean, it's super broad. I think there's probably 1,000 ways that you can express yourself, and there's no real like I don't know. There's no right way or wrong way. I think it's just highly individual, you know. And I was also kind of thinking like a lot of it is kind of taking in the things that you enjoy about the world around you and like latching onto that and expressing yourself through maybe things that aren't wholly original, but maybe like your favorite movies or the things that you enjoy, your favorite music. Like those are ways to express yourself that isn't like being creative, like or original. You know, there's a lot of ways to do it.
Yeah, I mean, what comes to mind when you said that was just to do whatever it is, like Sanders was saying, a variety of different ways, but that's like authentic to your true authentic self, because we can do things in ways that like we think other people should see us or we want them to see us. But I think self-expression is like how to be truly authentic to who you are.
And I think age has had a huge thing, because how I expressed myself when I was younger is am I going to be accepted by who I'm around in my environment? And now that I'm older, I can express myself just for who I am, because I'm secure in how I want to express myself. It's changed, I feel like, as I've gotten older, in a good way.
Mm-hmm. I think that's hugely profound. And like, for me, I always like to think about any kind of, I mean, this is a very psychosocial dynamic, right? Like there's a lot of psychology packed into this idea, and there's a lot of social implications of this idea, because you don't really express yourself in a vacuum, almost never, right? Like how much do you really express yourself when you're alone? Like the concept of expression is communicative in nature, meaning there has to be like an object to whom you are expressing. Otherwise, like, I mean, I guess you could. I guess Marigold does like cry in the mirror sometimes. That would be a version of self-expression.
She's expressing to herself.
Yes. She's expressing herself to herself, and that's all she needs. Closed loop. But so anytime that you think through like a psychosocial dynamic, it's helpful, I think, to like think back through human development and think about like, okay, when do you first learn to express yourself? And then how, I mean, we talked about adolescence, probably, is obviously a huge juncture in human development. Like maybe that helps you understand some things that are a little bit more authentic to you, that are a little more disrobed from the adopted behaviors that you think are needed to be accepted and things like that.
I think that for me, in my personal experience, self-expression was easier when I didn't like have as much awareness as to my surroundings. So as a child, it was much easier to do whatever. Mm-hmm. And then as I got older, like, in school and everything, it became more of a crafted type thing, more of a stressful type experience. But yeah. And and now as an adult, like learning to go back to that childlike expression of not really caring and being more just personally expressive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of the same thing I was thinking. Like when you're super young, you're just you just are who you are, like Marigold, in the mirror. And then I think in in adolescence you want to fit in. So you're really focused on expressing yourself in ways that make you liked by people at school and make you fit into this specific group, and then I think that that might continue into your 20s maybe, and then into your 30s you're kind of oh well, it actually doesn't matter, this is who I am, and less apologetic about it and less trying to fake a certain self, you're just able to kind of go back to actually who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because you're so conditioned to be aware of what other people are doing, and choose to act a certain way. So my older son, is on the spectrum, and he does not care what people think about him. He went to school, he made cups out of paper, and he drew bears all over them. He's in 6th grade, middle school boy, does not care. And I find myself being Colin, are you sure you want to, being are you sure? Because I just don't want people to mock him or make fun of him or pick on him. He's no, mommy, I'm going to do this. And I'm you know what? You go, because that's a superpower that you don't care. And that's going to actually take you really far in life. And come to find out, he's met friends who do the same thing at school. And now that was a talking point for him, meet someone new. So
I think there's a huge, Ashley, you used a term like true self, which I think is something that, we journey back to at times in life, and that we depart from at times in life. And, there's varying reasons for that. But I think that, when it comes to expressing yourself in a way that is authentic, a lot of that, we don't know that a risk accompanies it until we get made fun of. The first time maybe that you get made fun of, or the first time that you get kind of called out for, or somebody disapproves of the way that you express yourself, I think it changes your voice. It changes your, persona. It changes the way you present yourself to the world. But I think, if I have learned much from therapy, it's there's a cost associated with not truly expressing yourself, be it immediate or lengthy, because it's a form of betrayal, where it's okay, but this is who I am and how I really feel, but I'm not supposed to be that or feel that. And so I'm going to mask it, which is a word we use a lot in the neurodivergent community, right? I'm just going to pretend that's not who I am, because that's not who people want me to be, or that's not acceptable. But the long-term effects and cost of that, I think, are quite substantial. I guess that wasn't really a question. That was just a statement.
No, but it definitely resonates. And this is a silly one, and I think a lot of people deal with this kind of the gendering of colors. And for the longest time, I wouldn't wear really anything colorful at all, probably into my late 20s. And recently I've learned that I really enjoy lavenders and light pinks, and all the clothes I buy now are in that kind of color scheme. I've got this shirt, got a whole sweatsuit that's a light pink that I enjoy. I wear all the time. You probably see the hoodie all the time. But it's how long it took me to get to the point where I'm I don't care. I'm just going to buy it. I'm just going to wear it because that's what I want. It's no longer about well, what if somebody sees it and they make a comment or something? This never happened, but those irrational fears that just drag you down. And yeah, it's definitely not healthy.
Yeah. And framing it as irrational fear, I think, again, points back to the life cycle of some of this. You're conditioned to exercise certain forms of self-expression or not. And so many of those rules that we create for ourselves are codified in childhood, right? Because as children, we're surviving based on rule construction. I know so little about the world. What I experienced the first time feels absolute. So if I experience it, and Chris and I were listening to a podcast the other day it was one on autism that we listened to a lot. And it was essentially on that, right, honey? The first time you experience something, or somebody in who maybe is autistic or something experiences something, they kind of create a rule that like, okay, that's what this thing is now. And it's very, very difficult to reverse that in them. Like the first time I have pizza, whatever version of pizza that was, whatever context I was, whatever restaurant we got it from, that's pizza with a capital P. And I can't divorce myself from that notion. That is always pizza, right? So we do the same thing though, in maybe different versions in social contexts where it's like, okay, if I watched a TV show where some kid got bullied for wearing pink, okay, that's codified in my mind that that's what would happen to me, or that's the rule. Okay, so I can't break that rule. And so we kind of like carry that as baggage, I think, into adulthood, even very, very subconsciously. And it limits our ability to express ourselves in an authentic way.
Yeah, so Joy and I were raised with like groups of sisters, like all of like my parents' friends had sisters our age. And so our childhood friend, my friend, every time I'm around her, I only see her once every few years, but she knows me. She knows Joy and I. She knew how we were raised. She knows our parents. I mean, since birth, we've known each other. And every time I see her, I feel like I take like a really deep breath and relax, because I'm not like that around anyone else that I know. Nobody in my neighborhood, none of my other mom friends at school, because she knows me. Like she knows everything about me. And I was like, oh, I put my guard up constantly, like 24/7 around all these other parents, around all these other friends. But like, she gets it, you know, it's like, it's crazy to me. I feel like I take a deep breath when I see her and I'm like, I don't have to put up anything. This is me. Kind of thing.
That's interesting. What do you think, honey? Sorry, Angela, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to say like that, like what Faith you're talking about, like there's certain people that just like allow you that self-expression. And a lot of times it is somebody that you've known forever and you know that they, like it's an unconditional, like you know that they know who you are and they know like anything that you do, they know where that comes from, you know, and that's like so important, I think, to have, because there are plenty of people I feel like that we encounter in the world where it's like, oh, I need to be a certain version of myself because I need to tone down whatever this, you know, or, you know, anything, it could be anything. And I think those people, that do allow you that moment, that deep breath where you can just kind of be, is like so valuable.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Self-expression is important, difficult, rooted in a lot of things. I guess the question is like, and I'd put this on our brief for this dialogue, like, are there thresholds for it? Right? So I know who I am. I know that I take the Enneagram and it basically tells me I'm a Disney villain. And like, there are a lot of elements of my personality that are like way into, and I know that relating to somebody like Angela, who's maybe on the opposite end of the personality spectrum, it's loving of me to adapt my personality or my communication skills in a way that would be effective for her. And we've all, like, I've met people like this who call their like brashness and bossiness and rudeness authenticity. And they're like, well, I just tell it like it is. And you're like, well, no, actually, like, you're a jerk. What is that? Like, discuss, like, should they just be allowed to be like that? What's the threshold between limiting or doing or saying whatever you want?
I think it's a matter of intent. I've been kind of thinking about this week, just because I've been thinking about like how arguments get started, especially when you're discussing very controversial topics. And it tends to be the case that the goal isn't to inform or to kind of educate. It's to be right or to like serve a very self-interested purpose. And, you know, I feel like when people are like, oh, I'm just being real or whatever it is, it's very focused on themselves. It's very narrow-minded, and it doesn't take into account like just the complexity of human interaction, and how that, a gentle hand and a hard perspective on something are things that need to be in balance. And I don't know, it's just hard to kind of crack that case on somebody, especially when they are so rigid and in their ways. But at the end of the day, it's if your goal is to help them discover, then I guess you have to put the effort in.
Mhm.
You can't just block them off, right?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's like you can't tell someone, we encourage self-expression, but not like that.
And that's why you would be a phenomenal whatever you want to be, Sanders, in office one day. I would vote for you.
Wow, thank you.
No, I have that situation all the time. I have friends that are in boxes because I know they are allowed to have their opinions about things, but I am not. And I know how they would react. And I put them in that box and we don't talk about it, But I always want to be a chameleon. I like being around people where it's okay and there's no judgment. You're allowed to say how you feel, and those people are the people that actually like create good dialogue and change and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
It's also, I don't know, people aren't evil. I mean, some people certainly are bad, but it's also, from their perspective, it's,
Mm-hmm.
they tend to think they're doing the right thing, or they're approaching it the right way, and you are too, right? So there's a certain amount of like just kind of pulling yourself out of your own ego and trying to look at the situation objectively, and trying to understand, like what made you get to this point where you're so rigid that you can't even like have a conversation about it. And how do you present that in a way where you're not digging a deeper hole, but you're kind of just shining a light on that like mode of thinking. Yeah, I mean, I don't have the answers to that question, but it's a hard nut to crack for sure.
Yeah, I think when you said it's about intent, that's meaningful, Sanders. And I think that a lot of times when I would look at, perhaps when I would evaluate somebody who's coming at you with brashness, bossiness, rudeness, whatever, I guess I don't know if I would define that as self-expression.
Yeah, that's what I was sitting here contemplating too, where I'm just not quite sure how to put it into words, but it almost feels like the opposite of self-expression, like guarded. There's something being guarded, and then it's a defense mechanism.
Well, I think that is true, but it also, I mean, it is a form of self-expression. They're expressing something that's unsaid. Where if someone's coming at you brash, angry, do it my way, whatever, I'm just going to lay it out like that. To me, I would look at that and say, like, you're not expressing the idea that you're trying to communicate. You're expressing fear. You're expressing anger. You're expressing something underneath this, where there's a distrust or there's whatever it is. And so, I mean, when you look at what expression is really, it's a response to something. It's I'm expressing that I'm excited for a football game coming up. So I'm wearing the team colors and this is who I am. And that kind of thing. You're expressing like joy, excitement. You're or yeah, if you're responding to people in a like kind of a closed shut down manner, and you're expressing like, I don't trust them. I don't, whatever. So I feel like everything is a form of expression. It's just not necessarily you're expressing what it is that you're trying to say. There's so many other factors that are going into it that color it. That, yeah, just to kind of say that I just express myself bluntly and that's who I am. And it's like, well, you're putting up a wall in doing that. And so you're expressing something from your past or from whatever else. So many different factors that go into it. So yeah, there's a lot of different areas in that, I feel, that you could look at and go which way to explore.
You can do the whole, how does that make you feel? But how does that make you feel?
No, I like that. And I mean, in so many of the communication stuff that we've discussed and had in community group and all that, we've talked about, unspoken communication, spoken communication, internal communication, all of that. Like, people can't help telling the truth. It takes an incredibly skilled person to not tell the truth in some way, even if it's their body language totally at odds with what's coming out of their mouth. What were you going to say, Angela? Sorry.
I do remember. I was just going to say, with what Chris was saying, I completely agree. And I think that comes from a place where the vulnerability maybe of saying what you're actually feeling and what you're actually thinking, that's really scary. And so I think that defense mechanism, where maybe people are being, rude or a jerk or whatever, that's coming from being scared of the vulnerability of saying what you're actually feeling and getting a negative reaction or getting the wrong reaction, whatever.
Mm-hmm. So all of us have to do inner child work. We're going to be good at expressing ourselves.
Go cry in the mirror for a while.
Full of marigold. Be my own therapist. Do you think that, let's do a little self-diagnostic. Do you think that you're naturally inclined to express yourself effectively? Chris is shaking his head. Okay, unpack that, honey.
Oh, I don't know. We have time for all that.
I think yes, but I think the unnatural part is what stops it. I think there's a lot of, when you grow up, there's certain expectations, there's the rules you were talking about. And so I feel yes, I am inclined for self-expression. And then there's something inside of me a lot of times that stops it still, and maybe the thing, I think we talked a little bit at the beginning, all the different ways to express yourself and Joy, with you've got your fun hair colors and, I wear I try to get different fun glasses. Right now my nails are 10 different colors. And so I think those for me, those are easier forms of self-expression where you're not actually saying anything, people aren't really commenting on it, but you're able to be here's a little bit of me, but there's still, I think, a lot of people-pleasing tendencies and things where that stops me from actually maybe saying what I really want to say or doing what I really want to do, things like that.
Makes sense.
And I think a lot of it has to come down to what I was saying before, your safe space, when you're around your safe people, when you have a supportive partner that supports you being whoever you want to be. It's easy to be myself. It's easy to express myself around my husband. Of course I can be stupid or make funny comments or I don't know, do whatever, and or Joy or Chris, so I think that has a lot. I mean, that's a lot to do with it too. And I feel very fortunate to have that support because a lot of people don't. Mm-hmm. And then it's funny watching some of my friends go through divorces and whatnot, and then being with someone that actually sees them and then hearing their story and being I wasn't seen for 12 years by my spouse, but now I am. It's incredible.
Yeah, I think we talked about kind of the maybe more experience-based constructs of rules that limit our self-expression, right? So we experience things or we infer things from what we see in life that make us think, okay, I can't go there or I can't share that part of myself. And I really think kind of we all have this like giant question box that we're born with that's just unchecked until until we encounter another person with whom the love and acceptance is truly unconditional. Because until we have that kind of relationship with somebody, we're always going to have this big unchecked tick box of, am I acceptable? Right? Am I worthy of love? Am I, all these things. And so if I don't know the answer to that, I'm always going to be checking myself to ensure that I don't cross some kind of invisible or visible boundary whereby I would become unacceptable and alienated. And that may be too deep for this conversation, but that's my general philosophy of it. But that's exactly what Faith just said, essentially, right? I'm just saying it a different way.
No, I took a few classes because I have a degree in early childhood development, and some of my psychology courses I was reading said if a child has one person in their life, just one, not two, one, that really accepts them for who they are statistically more likely to get a better job in life, have stable relationships, and have a more fulfilling life. It's just that one person that they can trust and be themselves with. So it's true.
Mm-hmm. What do you think, Ashley? Are you inclined to express yourself?
No, not at all.
It's fair.
Yeah.
Have you always been that way? You think it's personality based?
No, I think it was a learned behavior, like earlier, in life.
Yeah.
I used to put on a lot of jazzercise shows and stuff like that, so that doesn't happen anymore.
And Crystal does. So.
Although I do get like some of that when I teach Pilates because I like choreograph it, but not quite. It feels more of a performance than a expression.
Yeah. Chris, do you want to unpack any of your... You want to express how you're not expressive?
Nah. No, I mean, there's so many different factors that go into the development of that. And yeah, we don't have time to kind of get into all of it, but like if you go off of, like you're saying, the Enneagram, where you're a Disney villain, I'm a 5, which means I don't like to do anything until I have all the information, and then I can make a decision based off of all the information, and then I'll go. So if I go into a group of people that I don't know, I'm most likely going to shut down and not talk because I don't have all the information. I don't have your backgrounds and your histories and what you're familiar with and what you think is funny or offensive or what all this kind of stuff like that. And so until I feel that out and until I feel safe enough to kind of start chipping away at things, then I usually just kind of stay quiet.
Joe, I remember we were talking the other day, like, we're like, oh, you walk into a group. Chris, this is why you're married to Joy, just FYI. You walk into a group and you're like, oh, you breathe air too? So do I. We have so much in common. You wear shoes. I have shoes too. Do you have 2 of them? This is going to be a great friendship.
Yeah, ready like you. I think, though, I will say, because, I mean, Faith is actually not an extrovert. So I might be the only extrovert here. Okay.
This thing's going to wipe me out for the rest of the day. Just saying.
I have 8 meetings today. I'm like, score. I'm going to be flying high. So I think that there's a difference between being talkative and outgoing and expressing yourself. Because I would say that I am extremely outgoing. Like, I have never met a non-friend. Like, I love everybody and I think everybody's amazing. And like, that's just how I approach the world and how I see the world. Like if I don't know you, I can't wait to meet you. I'm just stoked. So that's my personality. And yet I'm very judicious with personal information. Like I will show you this layer, but like very few people know a lot about me, like about my past, about really much of anything. Like people know facts, right? I'm very willing to share travel log and like maybe stories here and there. But like when it comes to like deep heart stuff, I'm incredibly judicious with it. And even almost offended when people find out things about me. Like this year when Faith said on Slack that it was my birthday to everybody, I like flipped out. I was like, they do not need, that is a weapon. Like, no, you do not need personal information about me that you can then use to like, I don't know. It just felt very like threatening. Because then I don't have the power. Then all of a sudden you guys are in the power to like give me praise or thank me or express affection. And like, I'm not comfortable with that. I want to be the giver always, because that's a position of where I don't have to be vulnerable. So point being, I think there is a difference. Like just because I'm in your face and friendly and loud and whatever, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm particularly good at expressing myself, or even particularly willing to. Which I think then begs the question of, is it important? Which we kind of touched on earlier, but is it important to regularly express yourself?
Yes.
This is a dialogue, so that was insufficient. Although there is no judgment here.
Except just for me. I get that.
Just for you. Love you.
Like I didn't share your social security number. I just said it was your birthday.
I wasn't trying to call you out for it.
I didn't like give everyone our mom's maiden name. Like they're not gonna find like hack into your bank system, like bank account. Like.
Yeah. It just felt personal. I don't want people to know I'm human. Like, no. I don't have a birth date.
They don't know what street we lived on.
I was spawned in a test tube. Okay, so yes, it is important to express ourselves. Why?
I mean, one of the big reasons it's important is, I mean, when you look at all the different forms of expression, whether you think of writing, music, arts, sports, conversations, whatever it is, I think one of the things that's really neat about it is that absolutely every single person on the planet is coming from a unique perspective. Like nobody has the exact same experiences, upbringings, references, styles, choice, all these things. Nobody has the exact same life as you have had. And so to then be able to share and express that offers a different perspective that somebody else is not able to see and not able to. You can be in the same room with somebody else and see the exact same thing, but because you're bringing in a whole history of upbringing and education or whatever else, you have totally different perspectives. And so if you keep that to yourself, then you are the only person that will ever know or ever think or ever see whatever it is that you're not expressing in that moment. And so in not expressing, you are kind of depriving other people of that experience and that information or whatever else. So yes.
That's profound.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I also kind of think, we've talked a bit about connection. Like you mentioned Enneagram. I'm an Enneagram 4. I want to know like everyone's like deepest feelings about everything. And that's how I feel connected to people. is when I like learn their not their secrets, but their like deep feelings and the reason that they do certain things and the reason they believe certain things. And so I feel like I may have a harder, like when people don't express themselves and we're not seeing like the real deep down feelings and the real deep down them, then I feel like maybe I have a harder time connecting with that person because I don't understand like where they're coming from, That doesn't mean that I do the same though. I'm also bad at that, I think.
That's interesting. Yeah, because it becomes part of the currency of a relationship, right? And I think that those of us who view personal feelings, points of self-expression as currency, then have trouble trading with people that we don't have trust. Like if there's no trust, I'm not going to express myself to you because I don't know what you're going to do with that. Mm-hmm. That's interesting.
I sometimes even see those closed off friends as it's almost like a challenge, like what am I going to say or what are we going to do together that's going to have you connect with me in a way that feels authentic and genuine. I don't know, it feels a lot more special once you can get to that point. And not like not like a challenge, like something checking off a list, but just like a desire to connect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. So in professional contexts, like let's pivot a little because, so many of us obviously write for a living, create content for a living, have communication, right? Like that's what we do. We communicate. We write a bunch of emails and Slack messages and all the things, right? Like how much of self-expression comes into play as we put ourselves out there in the world, as we connect with colleagues? Like it sounds like, all of us kind of have a little bubble, right? Our loved ones, the people that we're closest to, that are in our locus of, moral center and all that, moral circle. But as we get outside of that into the world, like, should we be expressive? When? How? What's your comfort level with it? Should we be making an effort to express ourselves more authentically?
I would say absolutely. You definitely want to take a more measured approach, but at the end of the day, like, especially when it comes to working with different types of people, like you want them to feel that there's a human being there on the other side of the email and the side of the call. I think it's really important to, definitely be strategic, but be vulnerable when you can. I think a big one for me is, owning up and admitting to mistakes. I feel like that's a great way to kind of show somebody that not only you care, but you're willing to be like, this is me, I'm showing you,
Mm-hmm.
but we're going to work. Obviously, we're going to work on this, but it's just, yeah, it's incredibly important. You don't want to just be a gray box
Mm-hmm.
on the other side of the screen.
Yeah, when we did that personal branding workshop, I was like thinking about, we talk a lot obviously about this, like how much of me comes through, or should it, or can it, or am I willing for it to? Yeah. Were you going to say something, Ashley?
No, yes. No, I wasn't going to say anything. No, I agree with Sanders. I think I think it's changed for sure, and especially in the past couple of years with like COVID and being remote. We are all primarily remote and we were used to it, but I think like in where I am now, it's really important to show that you're a human. Like have a little more self-expression in ways that you can. And I think it's celebrated more. It seems like it's celebrated more. And I agree with Sanders. I do think that it helps people work together more effectively because they're able to understand who they're working with, how to talk to them, instead of just like the standard way of talking where not everyone understands, or that's not just how they converse. So to be able to be more expressive, they're learning how to talk with each other and support each other. And overall, it becomes a more effective working environment.
And I think like at the end, when you have that connection and we're working towards a common goal, and I think it in the end it makes you more successful. I feel like it, like when I understand a client and I hear them mention something on the side and then I remember that and then I'm like, well, maybe we could look at it this way, and then it ends up being a success. It's like, that's because I listen to you, I know what you want, and I'm going to try my best to know you and know what could make this a successful partnership.
Yeah, I think a lot of times for me, it's almost a discipline to express myself because I don't want to necessarily do it in places where I don't have full confidence that it will be accepted. But like when I left the corporate world, and I feel like for most of my corporate life, I was acting like a corporate human. Like it was truly just like, okay, that's how we act here. And that's what I was doing. Right. And then when you leave, right, or you start your own business or you're in a position of greater freedom or authority, you kind of don't have those parameters in place so much anymore. And like to Ashley's point, like there's a fair amount of agency now in how we present ourselves. Like I can kind of choose, right? I can wear a t-shirt with money signs on it, right? Like one of the first like client meetings I went to after I had gone out on my own, I was wearing like a Bob's Burgers t-shirt. Like this is what I want to do and this is what I want to look like. And like it feels embarrassing to almost say that because I'm like, okay, but that's not the corporate person that I'm supposed to look like. But I have never been rejected for it. I've never lost a client because I'm too casual. I've never lost an account because the work is what they hire you for. And I think it's less important now than it used to be. Like I'm not wearing a suit coat. Like it's okay that this is who I am. Never had someone quit because I'm not professional, because I am very professional, but yeah.
I feel like a lot of people want to be that way too. So they see like maybe their ideal self in how you express yourself. You know, like we'd all want to just be like that, right? Like, but it's easier said than done. You probably should put the work into it to kind of be comfortable, and it's hard. It's hard to do. I certainly respect it, and I think that's part of like the whole casual thing in like communication. Like I see you doing it and I'm like, oh, I don't have to be like, dear blah blah blah, and like structure every email like it's, you know, my first correspondence for like an interview. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, I think that's a huge point, that someone's self-expression, whatever it may be, gives other people permission, or it makes people feel like they have permission to also do the same. And that feels really powerful.
Well, no, I mean, even at the very beginning, I had to miss a meeting or something. And I was like, Joy, I got to go pick up Colin or whatever. She's like, you never have to make excuses for taking care of your children. Like you never have to you never have to be sorry. I get it. It's always whatever. That's huge, because I did not get that support at other jobs.
But COVID took down a lot of those barriers, so we often, I mean, I think sometimes we struggle to be authentic over screens, and we think like, oh, well, I can express myself less effectively because there's this huge digital barrier between us all. But like, I also know that like, you know, when COVID happened, I was having calls with CEOs and Marigold was potty training. And there was one time, it was like the biggest deal CEO I had ever worked with, right? Like biggest account, all this stuff. And I mean, okay, prior to leaving the corporate world, I would almost basically pretended like I didn't have kids. Like that's the kind of the agreement you make in the corporate world. Like, we know you're a mom. Let's not talk about that here. Like that was just generally how I felt. Like, oh yeah, they're great. And then move on. Nobody wants to hear about it. Nobody wants to, like, there's a stigma. Okay. Especially for people Ashley and I's age. So I think that, you know, when I went home and I was working from home and it was like this very like stressful, like, oh my word, I need to still like curate my background and look a certain way. And I have my kids here and the nanny and da 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 da. Marigold was potty training. So that was the frame of mind I was living in, right? Think to just try to keep up appearances. She like came running in. She was, can I say that? Yeah. She was like totally didn't have clothes on. She was whatever. And she was like, Mommy, I pooped, and like screamed it out to the world. And like the guy heard it and all this stuff. And I was mortified. I was like, I'm going to lose this client, like whatever. And I'm like, you know, trying to like, you know, go put a diaper on, whatever, go to your nanny. And the guy just cracked up laughing. And he was like, he's like, I have kids. Like, and I was like, I felt like the world shifted a little bit that day. And the Grinch's heart grew 3 sizes that day. Okay, I'm not trying to sound corny, but like it felt different. I was like, wait, so we're okay with this now? Like, we're okay with just, okay, so I can admit to you that like I'm potty training my daughter and I'm here at home because we're under quarantine and like, okay. Like, so I think that there are, to your point, Angela, like there are different, when you set a different precedent, it kind of has this ripple effect of permission where it's like, it's totally okay for you to sometimes not be okay. It's totally okay for you to have made a mistake. It's totally okay for you to be human and vulnerable and struggling. And obviously there are balances to that, but I think the balance is achieved when you're just a healthy human. Right. Yeah. Do you feel like it's harder for you to express yourself? I mean, we all work together only virtually. So other than Chris and Faith and I, like, I mean, I see Ashley a couple times a year, like, you know, is it hard? Does it make it hard for you to connect?
I don't think so. I think I feel a little safer with the, like, through a screen. And I don't know, I've not ever unpacked that, so I don't know what that is about. But but like, or maybe it's just, this is just, you know, what we've been doing for 3 years now, so it feels normal and fine, and this just feels like what life is, kind of, you know, or work life at least. But I mean, that's kind of, I have a ton of, like, I've made so many friends over the internet, and some of them I've never met in real life and maybe never will, you know. And some of them I have met and become like IRL friends. But yeah, I don't know, the screens, for something about it feels like a little bit of like distance or shield, where it feels a little safer.
I agree with you, Angela. I think for me, like the safeness, or like where I'm then see people in real life, I think with the screen, there's always like an intent as to why you're there, where so there's like some type of conversation to be had, whereas when you're when you're in person, it's a little more like free flowing. And that's when I start being like, have to run through conversations in my head before I say them. So I start to like edit myself. Whereas when there's purpose to the, like with conversations like this, it feels safer.
The only issue I've had, and I've had to run this by Joy a few times, just getting used to all of this, is when someone messages me, I'm like, is that aggressive? Is that happy? Are you sad? Are you mad? And then I would send it to Joy and she's like, oh no, they're fine. And I'm like, oh, okay, I don't know. Like that, like, is this an aggressive reaction? I don't know. That's like my only learning curve with virtual was I didn't know how to read certain things.
There is subtext for sure. Yeah. What about you, Sanders? Do you feel like you can express yourself virtually?
I would say I have a hard time doing it, and I feel like I've always had a hard time doing it, even with like texting on my phone. And Caroline, my partner, is the same way. We're both very like, unless it's very important, I don't really see why you need an immediate response. You know, we're those kind of people, and I think with this position in particular and working with Hire Writer, there's been a lot more opportunity to kind of like be a little bit more casual on these calls and, you know, connect with people in a non kind of business facing kind of way. So it's changed a lot because of that, but I definitely have to put effort into it. I'm a very like in person kind of guy. I don't know. I always have been.
Oh, 1000%. I will call you before I will text you any day. Like I call Joy about stuff and I won't text her about it because I like talking. Like I don't like texting.
Yeah, we have some friends. It'll happen every once in a while. They'll call like me. They're trying to get a hold of Caroline, or the other way around. Like, why isn't she answering her phone? Like, I always have my phone on silent. It never rings, never vibrates, nothing. If I catch your text, I'll respond to it if it seems like I should. But I don't know. Like, I've accepted that about myself. I don't know. I've tried to change it many times, but it doesn't feel natural. So, but
thank you for expressing yourself in that way. I love it when I learn things like that about people. What do you think, Chris? Can you express yourself virtually?
Yeah, I think so. It's definitely harder, I feel, just because so much of the way that I communicate with people, I feel really kind of hinges off of reactions. And so I'm looking for, you know, micro expressions and body posture and all of these things that are delayed on a virtual context that make it harder for where normally I would want to say something, you know, goofy or, you know, off the cuff or whatever, but I'm like more hesitant to do that because I can't get the response fast enough to know if like, oh no, pivot, go the other way. And so yeah, I don't know that I can.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, like we had started at the very top of this conversation was like, this is like so broad because the reality is the definition of self, the definition of express, like we could like really go there. But I mean, I think it was useful to listen into all of, you know, the different takes of how you guys unpack this within your own lives. But I think that it's important to like some of the big things that I feel like I took away from this conversation, like it's like what Chris said, how it's really important that like you're the only person in the world who has your unique experience and perspective. And so if you don't express yourself, that never gets shared. I think that that's really vitally important. And I think that while there are definitely contexts in which self-expression takes different forms, it is an inherently valuable thing to do. Any other final thoughts about this conversation or dialogue? Self-expression as a concept, practice?
I think something that really stood out to me is kind of in the beginning when Faith was talking about how like you have these stages that you go through in life. And I feel like I'm entering a new stage in a way, you know, of not caring as much about what people are thinking around me, like we were talking about, like, and it just resonated so much with me. Like, oh, you go through your adolescence, it feels like all you do is care about what people think. And I remember like being in high school and like there were these shoes. They were like boat shoes. They were like leather boat shoes, and everybody wore them. And I had to have a pair, and I never got them because they were very expensive. They're $150. And I remember like that was something that really bothered me. And now like looking back, I was like, those were the stupidest shoes. I didn't have a boat. I didn't have a dock. I didn't live near the lake. Like there's no reason why I would wear those shoes.
They really made your feet stink too. Those
Were they
Yeah.
Yeah.
The fairy topsiders. I remember the name. But it's like now I would never do that.
Now we know what we're gonna get you for Christmas.
No, man.
Yeah.
I'll wear them. I'll wear them. So another fun thing about me, if you buy me something, I'll happily wear it.
You can wear them on your walking pad.
Get them nice and stinky.
No, but that's valuable. And I think it's part of being this feels like a really dumb thing to say, but like being an observer of your own life experience and trying to be conscious of the changes that occur in you. And yeah, I'm not going to lie, 30s, like fantastic. Just freedom after freedom after freedom. And you start to kind of break free and then go, oh, wait, this is all pretty much mine to decide. Any other final thoughts? All right. Good dialogue, everybody.